Story 41. My new girlfriend went insane and tried to get me fired. When I, 33 male, met a cute girl, 34 female, at work, we hit it off immediately. She was in our company's accounting department and assigned to support my team. She did not report to me. She did my department's financials and forecasting. We started out with monthly meetings that led to her asking to be part of my weekly staff meeting with my team managers. Those meetings went smoothly, and having a smart, motivated finance partner on my team was great. She was born in Vietnam and came to the United States as a refugee when she was a baby. She spoke excellent English but had a definite Vietnamese accent because her parents spoke very little English. Lynn and I chatted over morning coffee, and our relationship grew from professional to more personal over a few months. We were very open about going to lunch together and hanging out during breaks, so it wasn't some secret we were trying to keep. Eventually, at lunch one day, she asked if I wanted her to cook dinner for me sometime, and I was happy to accept. We planned our outing for the coming Saturday, and everything went really well. She cooked a very traditional meal for me, and it was by far the best Vietnamese dish I've ever had. Earlier that day, we met at a local park on the city's ocean front. We walked for hours around the waterfront, just chatting and eventually holding hands. It was one of those times I reached out to help her over a rock on the beach and held her hand so she wouldn't slip. We just never let go. So, after a fantastic afternoon of talking about our lives and what we wanted in our futures, we went back to her apartment so she could cook. We chatted the entire time she prepared the meal, with me standing in the kitchen with her, watching what she was doing. I was floored during dinner when Lynn asked me if I needed to be home at any specific time. I laughed and said, "Nope, I'm all yours." Then Lynn said, "Great, that means we can take our time." I assumed she meant with dinner and continued chatting after we finished eating. To my immense surprise, when we finished dinner and cleaned up the kitchen, she approached me and started kissing me. She hopped up, wrapped her legs around me with a smile, and told me the bedroom was the door behind me. She was uninhibited and made sure to take her time with everything. So as we were lying there on her bed later that night, she just started talking to me like we were official and wanted to start planning our lives together. I was laying there thinking, well, this is fast, but sure. I'm not saying that she was wrong or anything like that. It's just that in her mind a set of circumstances came together that equaled us being a couple. That was fine by me. It meant I didn't have to do a big song and dance. The fact that we had this amazing day together on top of our previous lunches and time chatting for the last couple of months made me feel like Lynn was definitely girlfriend material. So we started our official relationship, and within a week, her behavior was already starting to raise some red flags. Lynn would find reasons to come down to the second floor, where my team is located. She's basically bringing down fluff items that needed to be reviewed, work that could quickly and 100% of the time be handled through email or a simple phone call. At first, it's cool that she's taking the time to come down and steal a few minutes with me a few times a day. As time passes, she starts coming down and interrupting executive meetings to get non-time critical signatures, to the point where our general manager comments that she should please bring this stuff to his secretary and try not to interrupt meetings. Lynn takes it all in stride, but I'm getting concerned. The GM, my boss, even asked me if she was always that high maintenance. I told him this was new behavior for her at work. I was working at a software company in the greater Seattle area, and we were going into crunch mode on one of our projects. To those of you who don't know what that means, it's the final push that can last anywhere from a couple of days to a couple of weeks. Days can go from 12 to 24 hours or more. When you get to a release candidate build, you are there until it's approved by quality assurance. So, the day our crunch time started, Lynn came down in the morning, and we went out to get coffee at a mobile coffee truck that comes to the complex every morning. While waiting in line, I told Lynn we were going into crunch mode and I'd be working late for the foreseeable future. She gets a weird expression and asks me what that means. I explained the process and told her I'd probably be at work until late, like after midnight. She seemed disappointed but said okay and asked if I wanted her to call me in the evening. I told her that we normally order food for OT workers around 7 p.m., and that I'd have time to talk to her around then. Lynn stops by every couple of hours and does these drive-bys on my office. Our company has a strange office setup where all the office fronts are entirely glass walls with a sliding glass door into the office, making it into giant fishbowls. Every time someone walks by, you see the movement in front of you, so you naturally glance up. So Lynn has come to see me a few times and has done multiple passes with reams of paper in her hands like she was going for signatures. She finally stops by just before she leaves for the day, says goodbye, and then tells me she'll call me at dinner time. Right at 7 p.m., my office phone rings, but I'm in the middle of a conversation with the engineering team reviewing bugs that need to be fixed. I looked over and recognized the number, made a mental note to call her back, and finished my meeting. I should point out that this is circa 1998, so there are no mobile phones. I called Lynn back as soon as the meeting was over, and she was polite, but I could tell she was crispy, like she was mad but trying to hide it. I told her I was sorry for not picking up, but I was in a meeting and needed to get the team focused on the next build. Lynn and I talked for about 40 minutes, and one of the testers delivered my food to my desk. Lynn finally relaxed, and we had a pretty good conversation. Just as we were about to get off the phone around 8:30 p.m., she asked when she could call me again. I laughed and said I should focus on work or be there all night. She immediately returned to her weird mood. I told her I'd call her when I got home so we could say goodnight, but I warned her that it would be late. She said that was fine. The night went on, and we were finally done for the evening around 2 a.m., and I headed home. It takes me about 30 minutes to drive home. When I got there, I walked over to call Lynn, and there were 9 messages on my answering machine. I hit play, and they are all from Lynn. She starts out nice, but each message gets progressively more agitated until I get to the last one from about 15 minutes before I get home. By the last message, she's screaming into the phone at me for not being there when I told her I would be. This is no joke. She lost it over the course of 2 hours. I call her and she picks up the phone. I ask her if she's okay and what's going on. She starts in on me, claiming that I'm ignoring her, and has a mental breakdown into just angry sobbing and swearing at me. I listened for a while, then told her that I needed to get some sleep, that I'd be at work tomorrow, and that we could talk if she calmed down and stopped yelling at me for doing my job. I hang up and go to bed. The next day, I arrive at work around 10 a.m. and walk into my office. As I settle in, I see that the red light on my Plantronics phone is on, letting me know I have voicemail. The quality assurance lead comes into my office, and we talk. I told him I was in the doghouse with my girlfriend because I was working so late on a Saturday night. I mentioned the voicemail fiasco and point to my phone. He laughed and told me I should probably check that message. I push the button to play the VM. Of course, it's Lynn. She starts screaming into the phone, calling me every name in the book. She recounts the details of her master plan on how she would get her revenge by telling her boss a lie to get me fired. She actually was so mad that she didn't realize she was confessing to everything on my work voicemail. The QA lead is standing there with a shocked look on his face. Both of us have wide open eyes, staring at the phone as she berates me and accuses me of ignoring her calls and cheating on her with some unknown and unnamed woman, saying that she was going to quit her job and blame me for sexual harassment. She said she'd make sure that I got fired for cheating on her and that she hated me for toying with her. As the call ended, I looked over at the QA lead and all he said was, "Make sure you save the VM." Our phone system had a feature that allowed me to forward a VM to another extension, so I sent it to the head of our HR department and then to Lynn's boss. I emailed both to explain what happened and to say that they should have her confession in their voicemail. As a director at the company, I also had the master list of home phone numbers for all the major executives, including the VP of HR. I called Gail and let her know what was going on. When I explained it to her on the phone, the QA lead was still standing in my office, and he confirmed that he had heard the confession. I told Gail that it was forwarded to her. She laughed and said I had nothing to worry about if she confessed everything. She then told me to avoid all contact with Lynn if possible. Monday morning rolls around, and I come into the office. I have an email from Gail saying to come see her as soon as I am in. I took the elevator up, and the first person I ran into was Lynn, who was waiting at the elevator with a giant box of her personal stuff in her hands. She looks at me as I step out, says she hopes I get fired, and enters the elevator. I looked at her and said, "Probably not, since you confessed your plan and work voicemail." She just stared at me with a confused look as the doors closed. I walked to Gail's office and she was talking to Lynn's manager. They laugh and look up at me as I knock on the door. Gail waves me in, and I close the slider in time for her to start belly laughing about the voicemail. She said she was sorry and that she didn't mean to make fun of my situation, but the fact that Lynn was so mad she left the VM was all the proof they needed. They would do an investigation to follow procedures. Her boss chuckled and said that she had shared with him a while back that her mother had been institutionalized when she was a child. Gail commented that the apple had not fallen far from the tree, based on the VM. Lynn's manager explained that he had gotten my email and listened to the VM before Lynn came in this morning. He said that when she arrived, she recounted her lies to him, matching the VM. He told her that he had read her email with the accusation against me and turned it over to HR. He said she definitely got a smug look when he said it had been forwarded to HR for review. He then laughed and said he got her a box for her stuff. He said she seemed to be expecting more empathy from him. She then said that she'd consider staying if I was fired. He told us he had just told her that HR would contact her. The investigation took a few days as HR did their due diligence and talked to people Lynn worked with. They asked everyone around her work area if I had ever come up to see Lynn. I had not, because she was always down on my floor, and I had no business in the finance area. Mind you, we are only a couple of weeks into this official relationship. None of her coworkers said they had seen anything, and that Lynn had only told them good things about me, about how happy and excited she was about dating me. On the flip side, when they went through everyone on the second floor near me, including talking to our GM about what had happened, everyone commented that she was always down on the second floor. They brought up the instances where Lynn would interrupt meetings and frequently walk around my team's area, peeking into my office. Apparently, one of the other admins had even confronted her, asking if she needed something because she was always down there. At the end of the investigation, Gail called me up and let me read the final synopsis of the report. It clearly listed the VM and had a printout of it, word for word. It also had pages of comments from coworkers, supporting the fact that I was never in her area. It also stated that she was constantly in my work area, walking around without good reason. This included comments from our general manager that he even had to ask her not to interrupt meetings. The conclusion was that Lynn was acting unprofessionally and that I was completely exonerated. At the next company-mandated sexual harassment training, Gail asked me if it was okay if she used a sterilized version of my case, most people already knew, as an example of harassment and another example that not all claims were valid. I was so happy she did this. The final act of this atrocity of the relationship was that I moved into a new apartment about 3 months after Lynn left the company. This apartment was nicer and a lot closer to work. I got a new phone number when I moved because I didn't want to pay to have the phone number moved with me. Yeah, that was a thing back in the day. The final cherry on top of this story was the fact that when I moved and got a new number, I forgot to have it unlisted. A year or so after this fiasco, I got home from work to a VM on my answering machine from Lynn. She asked if this was the person who worked at my company, and if so, begged me to reconcile. She said if it was me, to please forgive her and call. My name isn't uncommon, and there were a half dozen of us in the phone book, so she was just cold calling everyone with the same name. I deleted the VM and never heard from her again. I lived in that apartment complex for a few years and met my current wife, who was my neighbor. We've been married long enough that we empty-nested our 3 kids a few years ago. I still have the recording of the VM on my little micro recorder, which I bought just so I could save that recording. Crazy times.
I only post new and unique content. Please like and subscribe.